You know that feeling, right? You're just staring at a single sentence, maybe in an email, maybe in a script, and you rewrite it for the 10th time. You're absolutely convinced it's just not perfect yet. And then an hour goes by and you haven't even moved on to the next sentence. That feeling? That's exactly what we're tackling today. Welcome to TinyDrafts, a space for high-potential, unfinished people.
So let's really think about this. Picture a huge graveyard, but it's not filled with people. It's filled with your most brilliant ideas. That book you were going to write, the app you wanted to build, that painting you started but never finished. These weren't bad ideas, not at all. Their only fatal flaw: you were waiting for them to be absolutely perfect. And that's it. That's the paradox. The pursuit of perfection so often becomes the enemy of actually creating anything at all.
And there's actually a name for this trap: analysis paralysis. It's that awful state you get into when you overthink and overanalyze something so much that you just freeze. You're so terrified of making the wrong move or a less than perfect move that you end up making no move whatsoever. The obsession with finding the perfect solution literally paralyzes you, which means you get no solution at all.
Now let's be super clear here. This is not an attack on having high standards. There is a world of difference between healthy striving and what we'll call toxic perfectionism. On the one hand, you've got healthy or adaptive perfectionism. That's about having high standards, for sure, but also accepting yourself. It feels good, it leads to a real sense of accomplishment. But then there's the other side, toxic or maladaptive perfectionism. This is all about unrealistically high standards that are fueled by a deep, intense fear of failure, shame, and judgment. The focus isn't on growing, it's just on avoiding being criticized.
So how can you tell if you've kind of crossed over to the dark side here? Well, it often shows up in some really surprising ways. Take procrastination, for example. It sounds like the opposite of perfectionism, right? But think about it. Perfectionists are often the world's best procrastinators because the pressure to start perfectly is just completely overwhelming. And what about all or nothing thinking? The feeling that if this project can't be flawless, then it's better to just not do it at all. These patterns, the constant negative self-talk, that fear of failure, they aren't actually pushing you to be better. They are a one-way ticket to anxiety, burnout, and that horrible nagging feeling that you're an imposter.
And this quote from Brené Brown just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly illustrates the real core of the problem. Perfectionism isn't about striving for excellence or trying to be our best. No. At its root, it's a defense mechanism. It's like this shield we hold up, hoping that if we can just be flawless, then maybe, just maybe, we can avoid the pain of being blamed or judged or feeling ashamed. It's about fear. It's not about growth.
Okay, so we've diagnosed the problem. We know what we're up against. Now for the good part, the antidote. And listen, beating this requires more than just trying harder. It actually requires adopting a completely new philosophy, a new way of thinking about creating, well, anything. And who better to learn from than a master? Ernest Hemingway, one of the greatest writers who ever lived, gave us this beautiful, liberating gem. This is permission from a legend to be imperfect. It's a reminder that the first version of something isn't supposed to be a masterpiece. It's just supposed to be a starting point. It's meant to be messy. And that brings us to the central mantra of this new philosophy. It is so simple but so powerful, and it completely reframes the goal. Ready? Exist first, good later. That's it. The single most important step in any creative project is that first leap, the leap from not existing to existing. Quality, that's a problem for another day. Your first job is just to make the thing exist. Still skeptical? Okay, let's look at some of tech's famous ugly ducklings. Can you even imagine an iPhone without an app store? Or without even a copy-paste function? Well, that was the very first one. Or how about a version of Windows where the windows on your screen couldn't even overlap each other? That was Windows 1.0. These products, which are now completely iconic, were launched with huge, glaring flaws. Why? Because getting to market and getting feedback from real users was way more valuable than waiting around for perfection. They chose to exist first and then get good later. And this idea isn't just for artists. It is a cornerstone of modern innovation. Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, absolutely nails it with this quote. That feeling of embarrassment? He's saying that's actually a good sign. It means you didn't wait around for everything to be perfect. It means you got your idea out into the real world where it could get feedback, where it could grow, and where it can actually become something great.
All right, so embracing this new way of thinking is step one. But how do we actually put it into practice in our daily lives? Let's move from the idea to a set of actionable habits. Let's open up the toolkit.
Our first tool is all about practicing micro experiments. The whole goal here is to completely reframe failure as learning. So instead of planning some huge, perfect, high-stakes project, you run a series of tiny, low-stakes tests. This builds up your resilience, and it makes you way more comfortable with imperfection, because the cost of failing is practically zero.
And here's the simple framework. First, come up with a basic hypothesis, just an educated guess about what you think will happen. Second, design a small, fast test. I'm not talking about a 6-month project. I mean something you could do this week, maybe even today. Third, and this is absolutely crucial, evaluate the data to learn, not to judge yourself. If it didn't work, that's not a failure. That's incredibly valuable information that you can use for your very next experiment.
Next up in our toolkit is a classic, and it's a classic for a reason, the 80-20 rule. This is basically your secret weapon against wasting time on all those tiny details that don't really matter, which, let's be honest, is a perfectionist's favorite hobby.
So the formal name for it is the Pareto principle, and the story is actually kind of cool. It was named after an Italian economist, Vilfredo Pareto, who first noticed that about 80% of the land in Italy was owned by just 20% of the population. Then he saw the same pattern in his garden. 80% of the peas came from 20% of the pea pods. This pattern is everywhere. Roughly 80% of your results will come from just 20% of your effort. And just understanding that is the key to working so much smarter.
Let's just break this down visually for a second. That small 20% slice of your effort, that's the powerhouse. That's the part that's delivering 80%, the vast majority of your results. The other 80% of your time and energy, that's spent chasing the last tiny 20% of the outcome. A perfectionist gets totally lost in that big, low-impact slice of work. Your new job is to become obsessed with finding and protecting that vital 20%.
So let's make this really practical. If you're a game developer, don't try to build 20 different game mechanics. Find the 3 that players are obsessed with and polish those. If you're a content creator, go look at your analytics, find your few high-performing videos, and just replicate that format. For an artist, master the core techniques that deliver most of the visual punch. The goal here is simple: identify your vital few and then ruthlessly deprioritize the trivial many.
So when you combine this new philosophy with these tools, you unlock something that's genuinely powerful. You start to see that the real magic isn't in achieving some flawless final product. It's actually in the process of making imperfect progress.
And the benefits go way beyond just getting more stuff done. You start to build real psychological resilience because your identity and your self-worth are no longer tied to every single outcome. Your learning just accelerates like crazy because you're getting constant real-world feedback instead of just planning in a vacuum. And maybe the best part, you discover your best ideas in the act of doing, not just sitting around thinking.
Look, if you take only one thing away from our time together today, please let it be this. The game you're playing is not called perfection. The game is called progress. Every single imperfect step forward is a victory. Every flawed version of something that actually exists is infinitely more valuable than a perfect version that's still stuck in your head.
So I'm going to leave you with a challenge. Forget about making something perfect. This week, just focus on making something exist. What is one small, imperfect thing you can bring in the world? A rough draft, a quick sketch, a 15-second video clip, anything. Just let it exist. This was TinyDrafts.